The cabin had always been more than just a structure. Nestled beside a secluded lake in the Colorado Rockies, it was a retreat my grandfather built with calloused hands and old timber, a sanctuary where generations of Grangers carved out peace amid pine and snow. My name is Elliot Granger. I grew up chasing trout in the lake's clear waters, learning how to chisel wood from my father, and falling asleep to the crackle of the stone hearth. After a burnout-inducing decade in tech, I left Denver and returned here, restoring the cabin to something better than memory. That solitude was broken the day the HOA arrived. The Whispering Pines Estates development had crept steadily up the valley. Once a sleepy enclave of retired couples and summer renters, it had transformed into a gated luxury lifestyle community, full of transplanted executives and their granite countertops. With it came an invasive presence, the Homeowners Association. It started small, signs about speed limits, newsletters no one read, but soon they turned their sights on expansion. My cabin was technically outside their boundary, but they lobbied the county, claiming the perimeter needed cohesion. That's when Karen Albrecht introduced herself. Karen was the HOA president, self-appointed and unchallenged, a woman who bent rules like they were warm plastic. In her mid-50s, she dressed like a realtor at a golf tournament and carried a clipboard as if it were a badge of office. The first time I met her, she was snapping photos of my woodshed from the trail near my driveway. "Can I help you with something?" I called, stepping off the porch. She turned, feigning surprise behind oversized sunglasses. "Oh, Elliot, isn't it? Just doing a little compliance review. Your fence appears to be a few inches over regulation height. I'm not in your HOA." "Well, we're working with the county on that," she said sweetly. "It's all about maintaining standards. Property values depend on unity." That was the beginning. Over the next few weeks, envelopes began arriving, citations for minor things. Chip paint, non-standard mailbox, firewood stacked too high. I ignored the first few, then called Ron my lawyer. "They have no jurisdiction," he assured me. "They can bark, but they can't bite. Not unless you sign something." I hadn't. Still, the pressure mounted. I found my access road blocked one morning. Karen claimed it was for HOA landscaping. Another time, a notice was tacked to my door demanding I attend a community compliance seminar. I threw it in the fire. The cabin, once my refuge, had become a target. Neighbors whispered apologies. Some avoided eye contact. I learned Karen had a reputation. She'd hounded a single mother over a sandbox in her front yard, fined an elderly man for using non-approved bird feeders. Her word, unchecked by the HOA board, had become law. She showed up again one morning, this time at my door. "You know, Elliot," she said, her tone syrupy with threat, "the longer you resist, the harder it's going to be. This community's moving forward. You're a loose end." "I'm a private landowner," I replied flatly. "I don't answer to you." She smiled. "Everyone answers to someone." I closed the door on her mid-sentence. Winter passed in a haze of low-level conflict, passive-aggressive letters, HOA meetings where my name was brought up in absentia, rumors that I was mentally unstable. I ignored it all. My cabin, my rules. Then, for a while, the harassment stopped. Spring returned, and with it, a rare sense of calm. I planted new perennials along the porch, took my skiff out on the lake again, even let myself believe that maybe, finally, Karen had moved on. I was wrong. What I didn't know then, what would shatter my trust, my peace, and nearly my ownership of the cabin, was that Karen wasn't done. She was only regrouping, and her next move would cross every line. It started with a lock gate. I returned from a quick trip to Denver one Monday afternoon to find a steel padlock on the private access road leading to my cabin. A large laminated sign fluttered in the wind. "Do not enter. Property and title dispute." I thought it was a prank. Maybe Karen's final gasp at intimidation. But when I cut the lock and drove up, my heart dropped. My front door had a bright red notice taped across it. County seal and all. Back in town, my lawyer Ron examined the papers with grim silence. When he finally looked up, his face was pale. "Elliot, someone filed a deed transfer. According to this, you signed the cabin over to Daniel Albrecht." "Daniel," I said, Stunned. Karen's husband? Ron nodded. Filed last week. It's already entered in the public registry. They even initiated a quiet title action. If we hadn't caught it, I didn't need him to finish. The signature on the form was a crude imitation of my grandfather's shaky handwriting, somehow transported from a 1972 fishing license I kept framed on the wall. They had copied it from a photo. It was fraud. A blatant, barefaced crime. I'm going to jail over this, aren't I? I muttered, still trying to process it. No, Ron said, leaning forward. But they want you to think that. We acted fast, filing an emergency motion, alerting the county clerk, issuing a fraud alert. Ron called in every favor he had with local officials. Still, the process wasn't immediate. For days, my property was considered disputed territory. Then Karen made her boldest move. I'd returned to the cabin perimeter to take photos for our case when a county sheriff pulled in behind me. You Elliot Granger? He asked. Yes, sir. You're trespassing on land you no longer legally occupy. I need you to come with me. Karen stood smugly just beyond the tree line, arms folded, watching. I spent the night in a holding cell. The charge didn't stick. Ron had documentation proving the claim was contested, but the damage was done. Karen had weaponized the system, and she wasn't done. But neither was I. I didn't sleep the night I was released. I paced Ron's office as the sun came up, rehearsing every possible move Karen could make next. She had crossed a legal line, but unless I proved criminal intent, it would be my word against a forged document that, on paper, looked official. Then we don't just defend, Ron said. We go on the offensive. And so began the Counterstrike. Ron's friend Marla, a real estate investigator with a nose for fraud, joined our team. She examined every document Karen had filed with the county and HOA over the past 5 years. It didn't take long for patterns to emerge. Irregularities, backdated forms, suspicious notary stamps. Meanwhile, I filed a civil suit, not just to restore my title, but to accuse the Albrechts of fraud, conspiracy, and defamation. That made waves. Karen, ever obsessed with image, tried to get it sealed. The judge refused. Then came the discovery phase. Emails surfaced, Karen instructing HOA board members to keep Elliot out of the neighborhood by any means. Screenshots showed her Googling how to file forged deeds. Ron and Marla compiled it all into a damning portfolio. But we didn't go to court yet. Instead, I sent Karen a letter. In it, I laid out everything. Every false claim, every fabricated signature, every asset she'd risked for a personal vendetta. Attached was a settlement offer. Drop the fraudulent deed, resign from the HOA, and issue a public apology, or I'd refer the case to the district attorney and the IRS. 3 days later, she called my bluff. Do your worst, she said, voice clipped. No one believes your backwoods sob story. So I did. We filed a formal complaint with the county prosecutor. Ron also contacted the state's real estate board. Marlo leaked the lawsuit to a local journalist. Within a week, an expose appeared online. HOA president accused of forging land deed and property power play. The fallout was immediate. Karen was removed from the HOA board by emergency vote. Her husband was named in a criminal investigation. The Albrechts' assets were frozen pending trial. But for me, the most satisfying moment came 2 weeks later, when I walked past a now unlocked gate and found Karen herself, sitting in a lawn chair outside the cabin, hands in her lap. You've ruined everything, she said quietly. No, I replied. You did that yourself. The county prosecutor moved swiftly. With the evidence we provided, documents, emails, recordings, and statements from HOA board members who flipped once Karen was ousted, it took just 2 months for felony fraud charges to be filed. Daniel Albrecht, once a respected contractor, was also charged with conspiracy to commit fraud and falsification of public documents. They pleaded not guilty. But courtrooms don't operate on charm or arrogance. They operate on proof. At trial, the forged deed was ripped apart by the handwriting analyst we brought in. The notary who supposedly signed off on the document admitted under oath that she had never met me. One former HOA board member testified that Karen had bragged at a private meeting that she would bully Elliot into submission, or just steal the land if he wouldn't sell. After 3 days of damning testimony, the jury needed less than 4 hours to return their verdict. Guilty. Karen was sentenced to 18 months in state prison and 5 years probation. Daniel received a suspended sentence and hefty fines, along with a permanent revocation of his contractor's license. But justice wasn't just legal. The new interim HOA board dissolved Karen's policies. The perimeter expansion into my land was officially revoked by the county. In fact, a new ordinance was passed restricting HOA reach into non-consenting private properties altogether. Locals nicknamed it the Granger Clause. As for my cabin, I returned to it with a sense of triumph. Not because I'd won, but because I'd endured. I built a new gate myself. I kept the forged deed, framed, beside my grandfather's fishing license, a reminder how power unchecked can rot a community from the inside, and how resistance, backed by truth, can purge it clean. Karen would be eligible for parole in 10 months. I didn't care. The cabin was mine. The lake was mine. The peace, earned, not inherited, was mine. Somewhere in the woods, a bird called. I smiled, poured coffee into my thermos, and headed out to the dock.